welcome to Spitfire Mods. Today we're going to cover Xbox cooling systems and fan mods and what's best for the health of your Xbox. And there's a lot of choices, a lot of different things you can do with them. First, we'd like to cover the typical fan mod where they tie the two voltage connections together and connect it to the 12-volt DVD drive setup. Now, again, we're not real fond of that, and the reason we're not fond of that is because what that's going to do is it's going to force these fans to run at full speed. Now, by forcing the fans to run at full speed, you basically take away the ability to determine if your unit is overheating. In other words, you will never know if your unit should be running at full speed or if it shouldn't be, whether it's overheating, whether it's cool. You will have no real way of telling that other than maybe putting your hand back there or trying to find out, you know, what's going on with your system. And that's kind of a detractor for cooling, because taking away the ability for the user to know how hot his machine is a problem. Now, if you're installing a temperature monitor or something else in there, that might actually be a potential for a good cooling system. But again, we're looking to get our CPU and GPU running at a decent temperature, but not running too hot, to eliminate expansion and contraction. Our main concern isn't necessarily CPU and GPU cooling, because any cooling system is going to cool your CPU and GPU, because that's where your fan, that's where your heat sinks are, and that's where your conduction is taking place. So typically they'll run cool. What we're concerned about is the expansion and contraction of the board, which leads to the yellow light of death. And that's what our fan mod takes on. It's not that we want to cool our chips, which basically does no real benefit to us. It's cooling our console. Now, there's a couple different ways you can cool the console. One is you can control simply the GPU fan, which is your main issue, and my recommendation when cooling an Xbox is simply to boost your GPU fan with one of our fan mods, and boost that fan only, and that's to offset the heat buildup on the GPU, which is higher than the CPU. What I would like to see in a typical Xbox is better cooling on the GPU, and the CPU typically never has a problem on your typical Xbox, contrary to some of the internet blogs, but the CPU really doesn't fail. It's the GPU that fails, and simple logic is when you take them apart, you'll see the GPU thermal compound is all dried out and baked out, but the CPU is nice and moist and still good. So that basically tells you right there that the GPU is the one that's running hot. So our fan mod could be done in a similar way. You could tie your two voltage lines together, and you could run the fan mod like that. What you'd have to do is you'd actually bypass that. You'd splice your GPU together, and you'd just snip off your CPU fan, which is your brown wire. You'd cut the brown wire, and then you'd splice the brown and red together with the red wire. And this isn't a great example because it's a cut unit, but we're going to go ahead and show you an example of that on here. So if we're doing this, we're going to take a knife. Your 3-pin connector is going to need to be cut apart. So we're going to use a knife to cut that up. So we're going to take our wires here and cut back our insulation. It shouldn't be this hard. Once you make a slit in it, you can just peel it off and then cut the remaining off. So we want to expose our wires. Now again, our blue and black are our grounds, so they're going to the center pin, and then our GPU is the red and our CPU is the brown. Now we're going to show you, we've already done a GPU mod, so what we're going to do is go ahead and do the dual mod, which basically you would snip your CPU wire down low here. So cut your brown wire, and then we're going to go ahead and take the output, which is the yellow wire. Now our fan mods come with a tinned end, so you're going to snip them off, since we'll be doing a no solder method, so we're going to be crimping in with that. So take your DVD drive cable, and when you're holding it with the with the little dimples on the left-hand side here, this is the way it plugs into your motherboard from front to back. You got smooth side here, and your two little notches are on the left. So on the back of that, which would be the far end with the two notches, the end away from you, that's going to be pin 11 and 12. 11's on the left, which is ground, and 12 is on your right. So we're going to go ahead and splice in our. We're going to go ahead and splice into our ground and our hot line here. So this is our hot line, so we're going to go ahead and splice into that. We'll make those connections first because they're the simpler connections. So taking our pin 12, which is our to the back right of the connector. We're going to crimp into the positive voltage with the red wire, and then we're going to crimp into the negative line with the black wire. Now when you crimp these in, you're going to want to keep them up towards the DVD drive side. So if you pick the one end to be your motherboard end, go ahead and use the other end as your closer position for wiring that up. You want to try and keep your wires in the right slots here so that when we crimp them they split up properly. Once you grab them in there, they should be good. Alright, so we crimped into our power. We got our plug that goes in the motherboard. We got our black wire on the left, our red wire on the right, on the back. So we got our black and red hot line in. Now all we have is our fan mod with our yellow wire, which is our output. And it doesn't matter which end you use when you go put that back in, so it'll work on both. So now what we're going to do is we split off our CPU fan control. So we're not using the CPU fan control. We're going to just use the GPU fan control. So what we're going to do is go ahead and jump onto the red. Now we're going to need to put our brown wire in with the red wire so that they both get spliced, and then our yellow wire goes in on the other end, and just make sure they're not sticking out, and then crimp into there. So we got the red and the brown on the one side, the yellow on the other, and then that's it. So now you're ready to be installed in your machine. So what we're doing is we're driving our fans off the same connection. They're in parallel, so you're going to get a good 12 volts, and we're using our GPU power control line and our yellow amplifier wire going to both the connections. So as you can see, your brown wire is snipped, so your brown wire is just cut and not being used. Once you test it, you can go ahead and cut that off clean so that it's not sticking out. And then what this is going to do, both fans are going to be controlled by the mod chip. Using your 12 volt off your DVD drive. So that's one way to do it. The other way here is this way, where you just simply splice into the red wire with the feed, the yellow feed, and then your red and black are hooked up the same way on the fan mod, and you splice your yellow feed just into the red wire. Now the nice thing about this is you can take your fan out and your DVD drive out, and you can do it on the desktop. You don't have to do this while the machine's assembled or nothing. You can just remove it and hook it up and then connect it, and you're good to go. Again, I recommend just modding the GPU side, but to get a little more airflow on that side. Also, if the GPU gets hot, it's going to crank that fan up. Or you can go with both fans and amplify both. And again, you're not going to hear much noise. These don't. Had a few questions from customers. This doesn't sound loud. It doesn't make your fans go crazy. If your unit gets hot, your fans will certainly crank up and it would get loud in that instance. But under normal game time, you're going to have a little bit more cooling power, and at idle, your machine's going to keep all that heat at the cabinet. And what you should find is an overall much cooler cabinet, so that your board is not getting that heat expansion and contraction that you would get normally. So that's our XBOX fan mod. Thanks for watching Spitfire Mods, And the fan mod, there's a link in the there's a link on this video that you can click on and go get the fan mods. Right now we're selling them for $29.95. Or if you send a machine in for service, we don't charge anything for installation. It's just the $29.95. Thanks for watching.